Hey everyone, good evening or good morning if you're across the pond. Welcome. Very excited to bring you this month's live, which is where we discover practical tips and experts and get ideas for our fashion journey. If you can see and hear me okay, please feel free to wave and say hello. Let me know if you have read the House of Gucci book, which is obviously what we're going to be talking all about today. I can't wait to have Sara on as my guest today. I cannot believe she said yes. I'm so excited about it, and I'm looking forward to listening with you guys about the fashion industry, the 22 years that she spent in Milan. We'll just wait a moment for Sara to join the conversation. In the meantime, I'd love to know, have you read the book? I'm partway through the book and I've been loving it so far. I love the level of detail and just the glamorous lifestyle that's there over in the Gucci household. I've not been able to see the movie yet because it's not in English in the movies here yet, but I can go on Sunday, which I'm super excited about. Thanks to everyone who's saying hello. Hi Jess, hi Lauren, I can see you all there, which is amazing. I hope that means that you can hear me and see me okay. So just a little bit about my guest before she arrives. So Sara is the guru on all things family-owned fashion brands. She lived and worked in Milan for 22 years, studying obviously Gucci, but also other fashion kind of family-owned businesses like Versace, Prada, Giorgio Armani, and has got a wealth of knowledge that she can share with us today. And the goal really for you who are watching and who are wanting to join the fashion industry is just to get some practical tips that you can learn as a designer, as a brand, and learn what we can take from these mega brands that we can apply to our own businesses as well. I'm trying to keep up with the comments as we go through and saying hi to everyone. I'm just trying to get Sara on. There's no requests at the moment, Lauren, but hopefully it'll come through in a second. While we're waiting, if anyone has any questions, we are going to do... Oh, Sara is here, but it's not letting me join. Let me try. Sorry, you can see that I'm not very good with the tech. Let's try. It's going to send you a request through now, Sara. And there we are, amazing. There's always got to be some little technical thing to throw me off on these. Welcome, thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be with you and your viewers.
Oh, amazing, thank you. And honestly, since I announced this a couple of weeks ago, I've had nothing but people in my inbox, in my Instagram messages, just cannot wait for this and just very excited to hear from you. So thank you.
Absolutely, it's great to be here.
I covered a little bit about the vast experience and the vast career that you've had in the intro. Is there anything else that you want to tell us about your career and what's been the highlight for you?
Well, absolutely, covering the fashion industry was a real unexpected highlight. And I just want to remind people, I started out as a business reporter and never really dreamed that I would end up covering some of the biggest names in fashion. But I was working in Italy. I was in Milan, which is the fashion and finance capital of Italy. And it just happened to be that particular moment in time when the Italian fashion industry was exploding. And I realized that people were going to be so fascinated with, the stories behind Giorgio Armani and Gianni Versace, and then eventually Gucci. So that's kind of how it all started.
Amazing. It must have been such an amazing time to be there in Italy while all of this was happening. Because as you said, it was such an influential time, not only for Italian fashion, but how Italian fashion was actually influencing the rest of the world as well.
Well, it was really a new wave because up until then, the French brands had dominated fashion.
Yeah.
And actually also in the US, the French brands were the ones that were all sort of established in the big department stores. And it took a while for the Italian brands to get a foothold and to catch on.
And then, they've just gone from strength to strength and become these powerhouses that we know today.
Well, I think one of the reasons that the Italian brands were so successful was that they had a whole manufacturing and craftsmanship infrastructure behind them. And they used to call it like the filiera tessile italiana. I can't tell you how many press conferences and industry events I went to where they talked about that. And that's all since changed with global sourcing and the demise of many family-owned companies.
And yeah, it's amazing that so many of the Italian ones have managed to stay in place. I'm personally from England, and over the last few years in particular, we've seen a lot of those big brands go under. But with the Italian industry, it just seems to have gone from strength to strength. And obviously, you spent a long time researching these families and their this kind of humble beginnings almost. They obviously didn't start off as mega brands. Did you notice any kind of similarities? I mean, you mentioned the manufacturing already. Do you think that was sort of the main thing that kind of they all had in common and that led to their success? Or do you think there was something else that was sort of there with all of them?
Well, I would say there were two things. One was the manufacturing strength really underpinned these brands. So, when you saw a beautiful, like, crushed velvet jacket on an Armani runway, those of us who were covering the industry knew that maybe that fabric had been presented at a textiles fair, or a particular kind of wool or yarn that had been dyed in a certain way, or integrated with a synthetic fiber to make it more resilient. All of those things came, from underneath. And so that was, I think, the one thing. They had this sort of strong foundation. The other thing I would say is this Italian innate sense of style and the ability to look fresh in any circumstance. And I think the Italian sense of style is not ever contrived or forced or over the top. But it's very sort of, the sort of the casual chic that we all aspire to.
Absolutely. And yeah, I have some family who live in Italy, more rural parts, but even though they're not in like a style hub or a big city, there's still that, as you say, effortless kind of glamour about them, but it's so understated and easy for them. And I'm always very envious that they can just pull off these amazing looks without any effort. So yeah, it's amazing.
You're right. It does go across the country. It's not just a big city phenomenon. I mean, I remember on some train trips to little towns outside of the city centers, I would see women wearing the most incredible clothes. So yeah, it's a national passion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that about Italy. I must go again soon when this whole pandemic thing's hopefully a lot better. And of course, I should mention congratulations on the success of your book, House of Gucci. I've been saying to everyone all week that I've been reading it and loving it and encouraging them to go and get it. Did you ever imagine that it was going to be this successful when you were researching it and writing it?
Well, thank you so much, first of all. It's been very exciting and really very unexpected that this book had such a revival 20 years later. But I always believed in this narrative. It's a powerful story. It's an epic story. It's about the sort of eternal issues of family and money and love and passion. It did well when it first came out. The original was in 2000, and then we did a paperback right away in 2001. But, my publisher was pleased. It did well, but it certainly didn't have the impact that it's having now. And so I'm also really grateful to Ridley Scott and this star-studded cast for putting the story back in front of people.
Absolutely. And it's, a book that needs to be read, especially, and I was going to say especially for those in the fashion industry, but yes, I guess that goes without saying, but to the wider audience as well, because it is that complex story. It's not just fashion as a clothing and a brand. It's, it goes way beyond that with the intricacies of the family. And yeah, very excited for you that it's now so widely known. I don't know if you heard in the intro, I've actually not been able to see it yet. I'm in Germany right now, and they're only bringing it out in English here on Sunday, so I get to see it for the first time, which I cannot wait. Yes, I thought, my German's not so hot, so I should probably wait till they have it in English here.
You have to let me know when you see it what you think.
I will, absolutely. I'm sure I'm going to love it. From the previews I've seen and talking to people, they've just been loving it. So again, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
When you've been doing the research with these families, is there anything that you've noticed from the kind of sustainability side? For anybody who kind of watches the channel, they'll know that I am an advocate for sustainability, and I love that it's something that is getting more and more traction. And to an extent, I've often felt like designer fashion is more sustainable in the sense that it's not this throwaway culture. For instance, Gucci pieces, they're designed to last, right? It's not just a one-hit wonder, a one-season wonder. People have these products in their wardrobes for years and years. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I mean, these products are designed to be keepers, certainly for many years. And if they're, classic enough, they can be recycled, with other
Yeah.
looks and updated. But I think sustainability and your focus on sustainability is so important, and especially in the fashion industry, which, by all kind of reports, is being seen to be one of the most polluting due to the dyeing
Absolutely.
and the manufacturing process. So one of my sort of disenchantments with the fashion industry when I was covering it back in the 90s and the 2000s was that I didn't see a lot of focus on sustainability in those years. I mean, it was really
Okay.
just getting started, and there wasn't a lot of sustainability and there wasn't a lot of giving back. And I think that has changed, and especially with Gucci. And I've interviewed Francois-Henri Pinault, who is the CEO of Kering SA, which is the French conglomerate that owns Gucci now.
Yeah.
And he has always in his career been interested and focused on sustainability and social issues. And he actually wrote the social responsibility policy for PPR, which was the former name of this company, as it was
Amazing.
into luxury. And if you go now on the Gucci website, they have a whole sustainability site called Equilibrium, and they
Okay.
have
Amazing.
many programs. They're working on recycling, unused textiles, unused leathers, and unused packaging. They have initiatives for women to help, build their careers through a sustainable brand. And they have a COVID-19 program, a vaccination program.
Wow.
So they are very focused on these issues. And I know also Alessandro Michele, the creative director, is very focused on these issues too.
It's amazing, and it's so good to hear about that change because these luxury brands do have that influence over what everybody else is doing. So to hear those kind of big brands and those big players in the industry to make these things available for one, but also make those decisions, because often in the fashion industry, like any business, we're looking at bottom line and profit margin and all that kind of thing. And I think that's why sustainability in the past has kind of been brushed to one side because it doesn't align with that profit strategy. So it's really great to hear that the people up top are making those changes, because that's only going to trickle down into everybody else at those brands and then on to the kind of wider fashion industry as well.
It's very, very important. And in fact, I want to give a shout out to my friend and colleague, Dana Thomas, who is
Please do.
who's written a lot of books on fashion, and she's very focused on sustainability, and she actually did a TED Talk about it. And
Fantastic.
if your viewers want to check her out.
Definitely. I'll put the link to that as well. That sounds amazing. And yeah, I haven't seen it myself, so I definitely need to check it out as well. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. There is one good thing about the industry at the moment. There is so many resources now for sustainability that I can't keep up, but in a good way, because before it was so difficult to find information about these things, and now it's amazing that it's all over the place. You can't miss it.
Yeah, very important. I mean, we can't really turn the clock back, so we have to really focus on how we're going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. And that's why, one of the reasons why I like mentoring new brands and small brands, because I think they have the opportunity to start off on the right foot. Whereas other bigger brands that I've worked with, it's a really big task to change those policies, change those procedures and the supply chains and everything. Whereas, the startup brands, they can just do the right thing from the start. And in general, not necessarily related to sustainability, but over the years, you've obviously been around a lot of fashion brands. Is the kind of one tip that you think, or one piece of advice that you feel that all fashion entrepreneurs should kind of keep in mind, and from that experience that you've had with Gucci and those other brands, that they really need to focus on or to implement in their business to make it successful?
I think the first thing is that every brand really needs to have a story. And it has to have a reason to exist, and it has to have a reason to attract a consumer. And it has to be beyond just a beautiful bag or a beautiful pair of shoes, because otherwise there's so many substitutes, right? But to compel, I mean, there's a lot of competition for the consumer's attention now. And I think to compel someone to buy your brand, it's important that it's authentic, that it has a story, whether it's a family story, whether it's a craftsmanship story, whether it's a sustainability story. It has to have a reason to live. And that will also make it more lasting. And it's very, very hard for, I think, young designers to start out. And they're up against, the big guys. And even back, days when I was covering fashion in Milan, I interviewed many young designers who were launching their brands. And it was very difficult to get enough capital on the starting side to be able to finance the purchase of the material, production, the distribution. And so I think it's important to have good backing. And a good support system. And as I said, this fashion infrastructure in Italy has now kind of changed, and we're into a more global sourcing model. And so it's going to be very important, I think, for young designers to also have expertise on the sourcing side to make sure that they're getting the materials that they need, and the costs, and in the time frame that they need.
Absolutely. All really amazing tips. Absolutely. And I guess to add to the manufacturing thing, I actually found it really interesting at the start when you were talking about the relationship that Gucci had with their manufacturers. And I think it is a shame that so much now is sourced overseas. And as brands, we kind of lose that relationship that we once had with craftspeople. And to anybody watching, starting a brand who's maybe not got their manufacturing supply chain in place yet, I definitely encourage you to see what's around locally, because those relationships that you can build are so powerful. And to those craftspeople, those tradespeople, your order is so valuable to them, because you're local, you're both helping each other out, versus some far-flung destination where they've never met you, there's no personal connection there. I think it's one of the reasons why perhaps sometimes the quality can slide, because you're just not able to be there and present so often and have those very skilled craftspeople that you might be able to get locally.
That's a really good point. And I remember in some cases, like the fabric manufacturer would front the fabric to the young designer to support him,
Wow.
In order to help them get started, so that then they could pay them after they actually sold the clothing in the shop, because it's a pretty long cycle. You have to have the designs made, you have to have them on the runway or in a show or somehow presented to the buyers, and then you have to make them, and then you have to get them in the store, and you have to sell them. And so it's a really long time between when you've put all that money for the cost of the products to when you actually see the return on it.
And that's such a generous policy that some of those fabric suppliers have had. And again, something that you're definitely not going to get if you're working with someone halfway around the world, because they don't know that you're good for it, and for that remaining balance. So yeah, definitely the power of relationships, I think, is perhaps underrated these days, especially in the digital age where everyone's always on their phone and not face to face. I guess the pandemic has a lot to do with that, but in general, I'm personally very excited to get out there, back to meeting manufacturers, going to trade shows, and making those connections that are very powerful.
Absolutely. I think that's really good advice.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for all those amazing things that you just shared. I hope that the people watching have got their notebooks out or can watch the replays, because there was a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time there. So thank you. I'll open up the floor if anybody watching has any questions. But in the meantime, Sarah, you've got quite a good selection of resources that I'm going to link to. Did you want to tell us a little bit about them?
Well, in order to promote the book, but also give readers a little more flavor of the story behind the book, I'm on Instagram at Sara Gay Forden, and there's a lot of images there of the premieres. I mean, this was kind of a Cinderella moment for me, being on the red carpet and being able to talk about the book. But I always also wanted to give people just a peek into the sort of the places behind the book. And so we have a key locations feature where I take readers behind the scenes to the restaurant Santa Lucia, where Maurizio Gucci courted Patrizia when they were just starting to fall in love, or the picture of the jail where Patrizia served her sentence, or the picture of the apartment, on the luxury apartment on Corso Venezia, where first Maurizio lived with his girlfriend Paola, and then later Patrizia took over. And those are also have quotes from the book. So I thought that was kind of a fun feature to share. And then I have a website, my writer's website, which is saragayforden.com. And some of the Instagram pieces flow onto that too. There's also a calendar there of my events, and I'm going to be speaking at a literary festival in Dubai in February.
Wow.
So I'll be posting about that too if people want to stay tuned.
Oh, amazing. So I'll definitely link to all of those below. And yeah, amazing that you've got all of those resources. Thank you. We did have a question from Jess who says we can all see how amazing your work is. Was there a particular thing that kind of drew you into fashion? You said you started off in business. Was it sort of a conscious decision, I'll move into fashion, or did something in particular happen that kind of changed that trajectory for you a little bit?
Well, actually, when I was in college, I was writing for a local newspaper in the Pioneer Valley in Massachusetts. And I found some wonderful local characters who were local business owners. And I ran a series of features. And I just love telling stories about interesting people. And then as I went out and started my career as a journalist, I thought, well, no one's going to pay me to make a living writing, personality profiles of interesting people. But when I went back to school to get my master's degree, I thought, well, there's interesting people behind business stories. And so there I found myself in Milan writing about business, and I was writing about the Milan stock market and very kind of wire service kind of coverage. We had to do market reports and dollar reports. And, as they say in the beginning of one's career, you kind of have to, put in the work.
Absolutely, yes.
and I was getting kind of bored with that. And I thought, well, at that moment, I realized that the fashion industry was starting to boom. And there were people like Giorgio Armani and Gianni Versace who were right in Milan who were really interesting. And I thought, oh, people are going to not care about this Milan Stock Exchange 10 years from now, but I'll bet they're going to want to know about Gianni Versace.
Absolutely.
So at that point, I sort of started to focus on writing about these personalities and their businesses. So I was covering fashion from the business perspective. And Gucci wasn't on the front lines in those years. Gucci was considered a kind of a has-been, dusty, family-owned Florentine leather goods company. And it wasn't until the drama started sort of playing out before my eyes that I realized actually this was something I could dig my teeth into and had enough, meat on the bones to become a book.
Amazing. It's also fascinating. I feel like I could talk to you forever about all this stuff. We did have someone in the group actually who was in Dubai. So they're saying they're excited to meet you in Dubai at the event. And yeah, that will be really, really cool. Is that for authors in general, the event in Dubai, rather than a fashion specific event?
Yes, it's an annual literary festival. It's called the Emirates Literary Festival, and there are amazing authors coming. So I'm actually excited to meet other writers. And it's from, I think, starts the 3rd. I'm actually getting there on the 9th. Yeah, I'm very excited to go.
A couple of weeks, yeah. Have you been to Dubai before?
I have, actually. I was there
in the
90s for a luxury conference. And it was sponsored at the time by the International Herald Tribune, and their fashion critic Susie Mankius was holding luxury conferences around major cities around the world.
Yeah.
And actually, Francois-André Pinault, who is the head of the group that owns Gucci, was a keynote speaker that year.
Incredible. That's so much more glamorous than when I was there. I boarded a plane from Singapore to London. There was a medical emergency. We had to emergency land in Dubai, and then European airspace closed from that volcano quite a few years ago. I don't know if you remember. So I had no Dubai money, visas, anything, and was just stuck for a little while. So I'm sworn that I must go back in a time when I was planned to be there and knew what I was letting myself in for. So yeah, it's a much more glamorous experience than mine. I'm sure you're going to have a fabulous time there again.
I can't wait.
There's one other question just about the storytelling side of things. So I thought it was really interesting that you highlighted that as something that's important for brands, to have that story and, to create that interest as to why people should choose you as a brand as opposed to competitors. And as a writer, I presume it's kind of easy for you to sort of find the story sort of hidden away in the details. Do you have any kind of tips for how somebody can kind of develop storytelling when it's maybe not their forte naturally?
I think it's really about looking at sort of what are the core values of the brand. So is it about the fabrics? Do you have a special fabric? Is it about the cut? Is it about where you come from and what you're trying to say through your brand? Is there like a social message? I mean, there are many different ways, I think, to tell the story. Is it about an entrepreneurial, innovation that maybe you have come up with. So there are many different ways to tell these stories, but I think it's definitely important to have a story.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with that. And even in the way I think that you present your products on product pages, especially if you're in the kind of the higher end luxury space, just writing black dress made of this fabric is just not going to cut it. You've got to entice the buyer and get them into that brand stories and be aspirational about it in the writing, even if that is just kind of a quote unquote boring caption or something. It all needs to be part of that story and well written and well thought through.
Yeah, or it can even be like, who is the woman who's going to wear that little black dress? So what's your take going to be on the little black dress? And I remember when I was doing Dawn Mello, who was Gucci's creative director, who was brought in by Maurizio Gucci. And at the time, all they had were shoes and handbags. They didn't actually have fashion. And her challenge was to put clothes on this Gucci woman. You know, she said, you know, you can't send a handbag and a pair of shoes down a runway. She has to be wearing something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what did she wear, and why is she going to wear it?
Yeah, and getting inside that mindset of that customer and who they are, and avoiding trying to sell to everybody. It's something that I'm talking people out of all the time, that you've got to be really specific as to who that woman is that's going to put your clothes on.
Exactly.
Sarah, this has been amazing. I feel like I could ask you a million more questions, but I know that your time is very, very valuable. So thank you so much for all of the great stuff that you have shared here today. I'm going to put all the links below so that people can find you, come to your events, and definitely get the book. I can't recommend it enough. So I can leave it there so you can get to the rest of your day. But thank you again for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks to all your listeners, and let's stay in touch.
Absolutely. It was wonderful to meet you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. You too. Likewise.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.